Okay, let's get in something that, well, it always makes you kind of scratch your head, doesn't it?
Hmm.
You see these absolutely incredible athletes, top of their game. Think
Yeah.
Warren Sapp, Antoine Walker, Mike Tyson. Huge names.
Global icons, some of them.
Exactly. Earning these just astronomical amounts of money. You think they're set for life, financially secure forever.
Just the perception.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And yet, the stories keep coming out. Guys facing like serious financial trouble, bankruptcy even, just a few years after they hang up their boots or sneakers. What's really going on there?
Yeah, it's a really compelling and actually quite a complex situation when you start digging. The image is one thing, endless wealth, right? But the data, that tells a very different story for, well, a surprisingly large number of them.
Right. So that's what we're really going to unpack today. We've looked at some really interesting analysis and stats, trying to understand why so many former pros hit these financial walls.
Hmm.
Is it just, are they uniquely bad with money? Or is it more complicated? Are there bigger factors involved?
And I think that's the key question, isn't it? What are the actual drivers?
Yeah. And importantly for you listening in, what can we all maybe learn from their experiences? About managing money, sudden wealth, that kind of thing, whatever our own situation might be.
Those are exactly the questions we need to tackle. And the sources we've got, they offer a pretty rich picture stats, case studies, some really insightful analysis that gets us past the sort of simple explanations.
Okay, so let's start with the money itself, the sheer scale. It's hard to even wrap your head around sometimes.
It really
It's
is.
the average NBA salary, what was it in 2023, like nearly $10 million a year?
Yeah, around $9.7 million, dollars, just the average.
Just the average. And then you've got the mega deals like Patrick Mahomes in the NFL. That contract was, what, over $450 million?
It's enormous figures. So you can absolutely see how this idea, this illusion almost of just endless wealth takes root.
Of course, it seems bottomless.
It certainly gives that impression, that earning potential at the very top. It's undeniable. But what's really striking is the gap between those huge numbers and how vulnerable many athletes become, often pretty quickly after their careers end.
Which brings us to those stats, the ones that really make you pause. That Sports Illustrated study from 2009. It's a bit dated now, but still shocking.
Yeah, it really grabbed headlines.
It said, what, within just 5 years of retirement, 78% of former NFL players,
78% and 60% of NBA players.
60%, facing financial distress, bankruptcy, foreclosure, serious money trouble. That's a huge contrast to the image, isn't it?
It's a staggering reality check. It just shows that even with massive earnings during, let's face it, often quite short careers, long-term security is absolutely not guaranteed.
No.
And as we dig deeper, you find it's rarely just one thing. It's usually a mix, a sort of confluence of different pressures and factors.
Yeah, it sounds like a perfect storm scenario for a lot of them.
Yeah.
And I guess one of the first things that jumps out is just the lifestyle,
Oh,
right?
absolutely.
You suddenly get millions dumped into your bank account. The temptation for the mansion, the fancy cars, maybe the private jet. It must be intense.
It's kind of understandable, isn't it? A natural consequence of getting so much money so fast. For many athletes, maybe coming from backgrounds without much money,
Yeah.
this huge influx can quickly make a really, really extravagant lifestyle feel, well, normal.
Right. But the problem is, as you mentioned, those careers are short. NFL average is what, three and a bit years?
It's about 3.3 years, yeah. NBA is a bit longer, maybe 4.8 years on average.
So that level of spending, that millionaire lifestyle,
Hmm.
it's just not sustainable once the paychecks stop coming in, is it?
Not at all. It's built on an income stream that's inherently temporary for most.
Exactly. It's like living in this temporary financial bubble. And I guess there's a big psychological piece to this thing called sudden wealth syndrome. What's that about?
Yeah, that's a recognized concept. It basically describes the psychological and behavioral shifts, the challenges that can happen when someone gets a whole lot richer very, very quickly. Athletes, often turn pro when they're really young, early 20s, sometimes even late teens. They might just lack the life experience, the maturity.
Financial know-how.
Exactly, the financial literacy to handle these huge sums effectively. And that sudden change in status, it can really mess with your decision making.
And they're not making these choices in a vacuum either, are they?
Yeah.
The whole culture around pro sports, it almost seems to, like, glorify that flashy lifestyle.
Nah, it definitely did.
You see it in music videos, on social media.
Yeah,
Everyone's showing off the bling, the cars. There must be huge peer pressure to keep up appearances.
absolutely. That conspicuous consumption, showing off your wealth, it's often baked into the narrative of success in that world.
Right.
So for a young athlete, trying to resist that pressure, trying not to buy the expensive watch or the custom car when everyone else is, that's going to be incredibly tough.
Yeah, I bet.
There was that ESPN report back in 2018. It mentioned NBA rookies dropping like 100 grand on jewelry, 500,000 on a car, almost right after getting their first big paycheck.
Wow. Straight away.
Yeah. It kind of sets a pattern, doesn't it? Right from the start. High spending becomes the norm.
It really paints a picture. And looking at, specific cases, Antoine Walker's story is just, wow.
Yeah, it's a classic, unfortunately.
Earned over $108 million playing basketball. A huge amount. And yet, he files for bankruptcy in 2010. How did that happen?
Well, Walker's situation is sadly kind of a textbook example of several of these pitfalls coming together.
Okay.
There was the lavish spending, absolutely. Multiple homes, luxury cars, reportedly like $400,000 just on jewelry.
Oof.
Plus, he was known for supporting a really large entourage, friends, family.
Right, the entourage thing. We'll come back to that.
Yeah. And then on top of that, he made some big debts on real estate investments right before the 2008 housing crash.
Bad timing.
Terrible timing, massive losses. And he actually said something quite telling later, didn't he?
Yeah, that quote, I thought the money would never run out. I didn't know how to say no.
Exactly. That quote just says so much, doesn't it? About the mindset, the maybe lack of foresight, that feeling of invincibility.
Totally. And it hints at maybe not having the financial understanding or maybe the confidence to just say no to demands or even to his own impulses.
Right. And it's not just their spending during their careers, is it?
Yeah.
There's also this pressure, it seems, to keep up that image of success after they retire.
Yeah, explain that.
Well, that pressure to seem affluent, successful, it doesn't just switch off when the final whistle blows.
Okay.
So you might see former athletes still throwing lavish parties, buying expensive gifts, maybe getting talked into risky business ventures, all to maintain that perception, that status they once had.
Yeah.
And that just drains resources further.
Right. Got to keep up appearances.
Yeah.
And then you mentioned entourages with Walker. That seems to be a recurring theme, too. How much of a factor is that?
It can be a really significant factor. It's a tricky one because obviously some people in an athlete's circle are genuinely supportive.
Sure. Good advisors, family.
Right. But there's also the risk of, well, hangers-on, people who are maybe taking advantage of the athlete's generosity or fame. Some estimates, like one from Forbes a few years back, suggested that maybe 15, even 20% of an athlete's income can end up going towards supporting these entourages.
15 to 20%. Wow, that's huge.
Yeah, covering rent, cars, maybe funding shaky business ideas.
Yeah.
It all adds up. Warren Sapp, for instance, reportedly spent thousands every month helping out friends with rent and cars. That adds to the strain.
Definitely adds up. And now, of course, you've got social media layered on top of everything. That must amplify the pressure to look rich.
Oh, massively. Social media is like a constant stage, isn't it? Everyone's curating their best life.
Yeah.
And for former athletes, there's this expectation to project that continued success. There was a study just last year from USC.
Okay.
It found something like 62% of retired athletes felt pressured to look successful online, even if they were actually struggling financially behind the scenes.
62%. Wow. So they feel they have to keep up this facade online.
Exactly, which can influence spending, trying to maintain that image even when they can't really afford it.
It's like a vicious cycle, isn't it? You spend to look good,
Yeah.
which makes your finances worse, which makes you feel you need to look even more successful.
Precisely. It highlights this sort of underlying vulnerability.
And it all seems to point back to maybe a fundamental gap, a lack of solid financial education for a lot of these guys coming into the pros.
I think that's a really, really crucial point. You know, many athletes, they dedicate their entire youth to sports. Their focus is totally on athletic development.
Right, not on compound interest or tax planning.
Exactly. And they might come from backgrounds where financial literacy just wasn't taught or discussed much. Then suddenly, boom, they're handling millions.
Yeah.
And the sports industry itself, its main job is to produce winning teams, right? Not necessarily financially savvy individuals.
So do the leagues try to help? I hear about rookie programs.
They do. There are programs like the NFL Player Engagement or the NBA Rookie Transition Program. They often include some financial seminars.
Okay.
But the feedback is sometimes that they're quite brief, maybe a bit basic, and often voluntary.
Voluntary. So not everyone goes.
Well, exactly. There was a National Bureau of Economic Research report in 2021. It found only about 30% of NFL rookies actually attended the financial literacy sessions offered to them.
Only 30%. Why so low?
The report suggested reasons like scheduling conflicts, but also just overconfidence. Young guys thinking, I've made it, I'll be fine.
Right. The money will keep rolling in.
That kind of mindset. And crucially, there often isn't much formal, ongoing financial support after they retire. That transition period is key.
It really does sound like a systemic issue, a gap in the system.
Yeah.
And that potentially leaves them vulnerable to, well, bad advice or even people trying to rip them off.
That is a huge risk. Yeah, when you have that combination of big money and maybe limited financial knowledge, athletes become targets for unqualified or worse, predatory financial advisors. People who are more interested in their own commissions from pushing dodgy investments than in the athlete's actual long-term well-being.
That's scary.
It is. An ESPN investigation a few years ago suggested that something like 25%, a quarter, of athlete bankruptcies involved advisors who were either fraudulent or just plain incompetent.
A quarter. That's significant.
It really is. Think about Mike Tyson. Earned reportedly $400 million over his career.
Mind-boggling money.
And lost huge chunks of it through, well, mismanagement, exploitative contracts, bad advice. Ended up bankrupt in 2003. It's a really stark warning about who you trust.
Absolutely. And we mentioned Warren Sapp earlier. His situation also involved bad advice, didn't it? Tied into his lack of financial knowledge.
Exactly. His case really highlights that link. He talked about spending heavily, the huge mansion, $75,000 on sneakers.
$55,000 on sneakers.
Yeah, but also following advisors into failed business ventures, restaurants, real estate, even an energy drink company, I think.
Right. So not just spending, but bad investments too.
Driven by advice he maybe didn't fully understand or question. And his quote on this was also very telling. Something like, I didn't know what I didn't know. Nobody taught me how to manage money.
Nobody taught me. That really hits home, doesn't it? It makes you wonder about the role of the whole sports industry in this. With so much money flowing through these leagues, shouldn't there be a stronger focus on preparing these athletes financially, not just physically?
It's a really valid point and one that's being discussed more and more. But the reality is the structure of pro sports is intense.
Yeah.
Think about it. Training camps, practice, travel, games, media duties, endorsements. It leaves very little time or even mental energy for deep dives into financial planning during their careers.
Right. Their focus is absolutely on performance.
It has to be. And then careers can end so abruptly, can't they? An injury, getting cut from the team.
Yeah, suddenly it's over.
Exactly. Often with little warning. And if they haven't built that financial foundation, they're left completely unprepared for what comes next.
And we keep coming back to the short careers. Even for the stars, it's often over by their late 20s or early 30s.
Precisely. Which means they potentially have 40, 50, 60 years life ahead of them.
Without that huge income.
Right. Without that steady, massive paycheck, that requires serious planning, serious saving, which, as we've said, many just weren't equipped or guided to do effectively.
And that feeling of being unprepared.
Yeah.
There's another study, was there, from the Aspen Institute.
Yeah, in 2022, it found that 65% of retired athletes felt financially lost within just 2 years of stopping playing.
65% felt lost. That's heartbreaking, really.
It shows the scale of the transition challenge.
So we mentioned the league programs, like the rookie transition stuff. Are there programs for after they retire?
Yes, there are post-career resources, things like the NFL Transition Program. The NBA has its After the Game initiative. They offer support with career changes, networking, sometimes financial guidance.
Okay, so there is something.
There is. But in questions are raised about how comprehensive they are, how accessible, and critically, how many former players actually use them.
So utilization might be low.
Well, one report from the NFL Players Association in 2023 suggested only about 25% of eligible players were participating in the NFL transition program, for instance.
Only a quarter. So maybe they're not reaching everyone they need to, or maybe guys don't engage for whatever reason.
Could be a mix of things. Awareness, perceived relevance, maybe stigma. But it points to a gap in that crucial post-career support network.
Okay. So we've talked Walker, Sapp, Tyson. But the list goes on, doesn't it? There are other really high-profile examples.
Oh, definitely. You can look at Curt Schilling in baseball, earned over $100 million.
Big picture.
Yeah. Lost $50 million in his video game company, 38 studios, bankruptcy in 2012.
Right, I remember that.
Or Vince Young, the NFL quarterback. Made around $35 million, declared bankruptcy in 2014. Lavish spending, taking out high-interest loans. Even Allen Iverson in the NBA earned something like $200 million. Faced major financial issues around 2012, partly due to spending, divorce. Though reports suggest he's recovered somewhat thanks to endorsements and a trust fund.
Wow. So across different sports, different eras,
Hmm.
but the themes keep repeating, don't they?
They really do. Unchecked spending, bad investments, sometimes dodgy advisors, and the fact that their struggles often become very public news. They serve as these sort of cautionary tales.
Okay, so we've painted a pretty clear picture of the problems. Let's pivot now. What are the solutions? What are the key lessons we can take away from all this? Not just for athletes, but maybe for anyone, dealing with money, especially if they get a sudden windfall.
Yeah, I think this is where it becomes really useful for everyone listening. The first and maybe the most obvious lesson is the critical importance of financial education,
Right.
and not just a one-off seminar.
Or needs to be ongoing.
Exactly. For athletes, ideally, it should start early, be mandatory, consistent throughout their careers, and tailored to their unique situation: high income, short career span, specific tax issues, etc.
Makes sense. Budgeting, taxes, investing, debt.
Yeah.
The basics, but applied to their world.
Precisely. And we're seeing some positive steps. You mentioned the NBA's pilot program pairing rookies with certified financial planners.
Yeah, how did that go?
Apparently, 85% of the rookies involved reported that it helped them improve their saving habits. That shows tailored. Professional guidance can make a real difference. Expanding things like that seems vital.
Definitely. So education first.
Yep.
What else? What about the people they rely on?
That's absolutely crucial. Building a strong, trustworthy support system. And that means finding qualified ethical professionals.
Like who?
Certified financial planners, CFPs, reputable accountants, experienced lawyers who specialize in this area, people who aren't conflicted, who don't make money just by selling them products.
Okay. Vetting advisors is key.
Huge. Athletes need to do their homework, ask tough questions. Resources like the Certified Financial Planner Board can help find qualified people. And involving family can be good, but with clear boundaries. Not just giving relatives unchecked access to the bank accounts. You need structure. Look at someone like LeBron James. His long-term financial stability is often credited to having a really tight-knit, professional, and trusted team around him from early on.
Right. Good example. So solid education, trusted advisors. What about the actual money management? Investment mistakes seem common.
Yeah, avoiding the temptation of those get-rich-quick schemes is vital.
The risky ventures.
Exactly. Friends come with can't-miss business ideas, or advisors push complex, high-risk investments. Athletes need to be wary. A much more prudent path for most is focusing on diversified, maybe lower-risk, long-term strategies.
Like what? Index funds, bonds?
Stuff like that, yeah. Things that grow steadily over time rather than promising spectacular overnight returns. One study by Fidelity found athletes with diversified assets were much less likely to face financial distress. And always, always do thorough due diligence before investing in anything.
Sound advice for anyone, really. Due diligence. And I guess overarching all of this is just planning for the long haul, right from day one.
Absolutely essential. Recognizing that the high-earning years are finite. That means saving aggressively from the start.
How aggressive?
Some experts actually recommend athletes aim to save at least 50%, half of their income during their playing years.
50%. Wow, that's a lot. But makes sense given the short time frame.
It does. And also thinking about life after sports early on, exploring second career options, getting training or education for that next chapter.
Yeah, having a plan B.
Exactly. We see successful examples, guys, going into broadcasting, like through the NFL's broadcasting boot camp or building businesses. Magic Johnson is a prime example of incredible post-career business success. It requires planning.
Okay, so education, good advisors, sensible investing, long-term planning, saving hard. These are key takeaways. And as we've been talking, it strikes me again how, while the numbers are way bigger for athletes, the underlying principles aren't that different from what regular folks face, are they?
That's a really important connection to make. Their situation is like an amplified version of broader societal issues.
How so?
Well, think about financial literacy in general. The Federal Reserve found last year that something like 40% of Americans don't even have enough savings to cover a $400 emergency.
Wow, 40%.
Yeah. So struggles with saving, debt, financial planning. These are widespread issues. Sudden wealth, like athletes experience, can definitely magnify existing problems or create new ones, but the root causes, lack of knowledge, poor planning, emotional spending, are often universal.
That's a great point. It's not just an athlete problem. And another thing is the public scrutiny, isn't it? Their failures are so visible. Does that create a skewed perception?
I think it definitely can. Because they're celebrities, their financial missteps make headlines. It can lead people to think, oh, athletes are just bad with money, and maybe perpetuate stereotypes.
Right, whereas if an accountant or a doctor goes bankrupt, we probably never hear about it.
Exactly. The financial struggles of people in less public professions usually stay private. So we get a distorted view focused on the high-profile cases.
And is there, I mean, we have to ask, is there sometimes a cultural or even racial dynamic at play in how these stories are perceived or reported?
That's a sensitive but important point to raise. Given that leagues like the NBA and NFL have a high percentage of black athletes, some research suggests their financial failures can sometimes face disproportionately harsh criticism or be framed in ways that play into racial stereotypes.
Hmm. Is there data on that?
There was a University of Michigan study in 2022 that analyzed media coverage. It found that, yeah, financial struggles of black athletes tended to be covered more negatively, sometimes with more judgmental language compared to similar situations involving white athletes.
Okay, so that adds another layer of complexity to how these issues are perceived and discussed.
It certainly does. It's something to be aware of in the discourse around this topic.
Okay, so as we kind of wrap up this deep dive, bringing all these threads together, what's the path forward? What needs to change systemically and personally?
Well, I think it really requires action on multiple levels. At the systemic level within the sports world,
Yeah,
there's a strong case for more robust, mandatory, year-round financial education, not just a quick seminar at rookie camp. Some leagues are moving this way. I think the NBA has a new initiative with Goldman Sachs planned for 2024.
okay. Mandatory and ongoing, that seems key.
Definitely. And stronger, more accessible, better promoted post-career support programs. The NFL has expanded its Legends community support, which is a positive step.
Right, more help after the game ends.
And maybe more regulatory oversight specifically for financial advisors who work with athletes. There was an SEC proposal discussed in 2021 aimed at increasing advisor accountability. Things like that could help protect athletes.
So, league and regulatory changes. What about the athletes themselves?
Yeah,
Personal responsibility still plays a role in winning.
absolutely. At the end of the day, individuals have to take ownership too. That means actively seeking out that financial education, really doing the hard work of vetting advisors thoroughly, asking questions, understanding what they're signing.
Yeah, not just trusting blindly.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And embracing financial prudence, resisting some of that cultural pressure to overspend.
Yeah.
We see positive examples too, right? Athletes like Kevin Durant are known for being quite frugal and saving a high percentage of their earnings. It is possible.
Good point. So it's a mix of better systems and individual discipline.
That's how I see it. Both are needed.
Okay, so to sort of recap everything we've covered, it's pretty clear that why so many former pro athletes struggle financially isn't a simple story. It's not just they spent it all.
Yeah, it's much more nuanced.
It's this complex mix of factors: the sudden massive wealth, the short careers, intense cultural pressures, sometimes a lack of financial literacy, the risk of bad advice, and maybe gaps in the support systems meant to help them.
Exactly. Individual choices matter, absolutely, but the context, the system, the external pressures, they all play a huge role.
And while we focused on athletes because their situation is so extreme and visible, the core lessons here, they really do apply much more broadly, don't they?
Absolutely. Financial literacy, making informed decisions, planning for the future, being wary of too good to be true offers, building a trustworthy support network. These are universal principles for financial well-being.
Yeah, things we can all think about. So maybe a final thought for you listening, reflecting on all this. Where do you feel the balance lies? How much is down to the individual athlete needing to be smarter or more disciplined versus how much responsibility falls on the leagues, the agents, the advisors, the system around them to provide better guidance and protection?
It's that interplay, isn't it, between personal agency and structural support.
Yeah. And how much do those cultural expectations, that pressure to project success, influence financial behavior, maybe even for ourselves in different ways? Definitely a lot to chew on.
It really is.
And ultimately, it seems like building and maintaining financial success, whether you're an athlete or anyone else, it's maybe not that different from building a successful athletic career. It takes discipline, preparation, consistent effort, and a really clear vision for the long game.
Well said. It's a marathon, not a sprint.